Let's go to another issue. How many Australians do you reckon sat around on Saturday night and said, geez, you know what I'm really worried about? Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act.
Well, it isn't a subject on everybody's lips, I can assure you of that, but there are important issues relating to free speech, but you're right, it's not, it isn't the big issue. The big issue, Lee, is the one that I spent 8 weeks of the election campaign talking about, which is the economy. It's about jobs and growth.
But you know as well as I do that the issues that politicians talk the most about are the ones that get the most priority. And so given, as you say, that 18C isn't on everybody's lips, then why are more politicians in your party spending time talking about that? You've called a parliamentary inquiry into it yourself, than they are talking about things like out-of-pocket medical expenses, the fact that the suicide rate among teenage girls has gone up 45% in the past year, the fact that the average Australian female worker loses nearly all of her take-home pay in childcare. Why does 18C get more attention than those things?
Well, Lee, this is a question you should address to your editors at the ABC, very seriously. 18C is talked about constantly on the ABC. It's talked about constantly in what's often called the elite media. I've focused overwhelmingly on the economy. I took a national economic plan to the election, every element of which is designed to drive jobs and growth. I was criticised for focusing on that unduly. I make no apologies for it. I am firmly of the view that my job as Prime Minister is to ensure the economic security of Australia, the prospects of our children and grandchildren, because fundamentally that enables everything else. I take your point
about the media and 18C, but it's also many members of your own parliamentary team.
Well, we can do, but people can walk and chew gum at the same time. I mean, issues of freedom of speech are important. Issues of economic management are important.
But you know as well as I do that the priority things are afforded dictates how much attention they get, and therefore often how many resources and how much energy goes into dealing with them.
Well, Lee, you know what priority, I mean, by all means engage in some self-criticism of the ABC or other media outlets, or indeed other people in Parliament. Overwhelmingly, I focus on the big issues of concern to Australians, and they are economic issues and they're issues of national security. That's why I talk about border protection. That's why I'm seeking to resolve the issues with the people that the Labor Party put on Nauru and Manus. That's why we are able to stop the boats, keep our borders secure, and then reach this arrangement with the United States that will offer resettlement to the refugees, to many of those refugees that the United States determines that on those 2 islands.
Well, in your first interview when you came on this program after you became Prime Minister, I asked you about the fact that life had dealt you a pretty good hand of cards, you know, good health and good brain and those sorts of things, and that you had played them well and been successful and amassed some wealth. And I asked you how you could reassure Australians that you get it. I'm wondering, a little over a year into being Prime Minister, whether or not the job of Prime Minister by its nature does put you in a bubble.
It's a very special job. It's the fantastic job. I love it. As I've said, there no doubt been better Prime Ministers, but there's never been a happier one. And I am very alert to the issues and concerns of all Australians.
But how do you get out of that bubble, though?
Well, one of the greatest assets of a politician, indeed of any leader, is empathy. And of course, you have to break out of the bubble. Again, I often get on the elite media like the ABC. I often get criticised or sent up. I don't object to that, by the way, for catching public transport a lot. Public transport's important. You meet a lot of people you wouldn't otherwise meet. And I've always, all my life, I've been able to meet and mix with people from every background, every part of the country. Only a little while ago, I was in the APY lands, in very small Aboriginal communities in remote South Australia. I've been out in Western Queensland, again, in just very recently. It's a big country and I get around to as much of it as I can.
One last question. When you replaced Tony Abbott, you cited as one of the reasons him losing 30 news polls in a row. You've now lost 4 in a row. Are you a believer in live by the sword, die by the sword?
Well, I believe that what we've got to do is continue to provide, I've got to continue to provide strong leadership, and ultimately the Australian people are the judges of that. You know, I would have thought after this last election in the United States, people might focus less on the polls and less on the opinions of commentators on the ABC or in other elite media outlets, and focus instead on what people are actually saying. The real issue, the real challenge for politicians, and dare I say it, journalists, is to actually get in touch with the people, listen to the people, focus on what the real concerns are. And those concerns are as diverse as 24 million Australians. Everyone's got slightly different concerns, but a big common factor is concern about economic security. Will I have a good job? Will I keep a good job? Will I be able to pay my mortgage? Will I be able to pay the bills? Will my kids be able to get a good job? And the thing that enables that is strong economic growth. Now, Donald Trump has presented himself, rightly or wrongly, as, and you know, people can form all sorts of judgments about that. He's been elected, and one of his compelling arguments to many Americans was that he was going to make America great again, and he was going to do that by driving economic growth. So economic growth is the foundation for all of our abilities to achieve our aspirations.
Prime Minister, we're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thanks so much.